how can you reach people's consciousness? How can you convince them to react and not to get lost and not to get drawn into this direction of medicalization, digitalization, militarization of the world that we are now facing. Look at China, look at Hungary.
I used quite a number of times already in our conversation the word self-thinking. Yeah. For example, when you take the infection model in medicine, yeah, we have the coronavirus, and everyone thinks the illness comes from the virus. Yeah, but only if one cannot think, one is thinking this. Because when you start to think, then you realize, and this is coming through all the serious messages from the daily reports, how many people have no symptoms but are tested positively, how many people have little symptoms, and very, very few people are severely ill. The big majority, more than 100,000 in Germany, are healthy and had very little symptoms. Yeah, this must make you think that the virus cannot make the disease, because if the virus would be the one, we would all have the severe symptoms. But we don't have it. There are huge restoring salutogenic powers in the body, self-healing capacities, which give us the chance to overcome a virus infection. And for example, if you give not fever drugs, but let the fever fight against the virus, if you have a virus infection, then your body can overcome this virus infection. Many people got severe symptoms because they suppressed their fever reaction of the body. But this is known already so long. In the 70s already, when I did my medical studies, I learned already fever is the only immune stimulating power the body has. Fever should not be pushed down in any case, only if the body cannot cope. And for this, we have the anti-fever drugs. But if people don't think, if people don't look, if people don't see connections, if people just believe virus makes the disease, you know, they lose their capacity of seeing one thing from different sides. And if you have a salutogenic illness and health model, what I have, then you see one level, this is the physical one, is in that quality that of course there is a virus, that it's healthy to wash my hands, that I can protect others by wearing here mein Mund- und Nasenschutz. That is all fine, that is the physical level. But then we all know our resiliency is growing when we sleep enough, when we have a healthy lifestyle, and then the virus can come and I will not get any infection. And we know positive feelings work immune stimulating. Fear and negative feelings destabilize the immune system. And this pandemic caused so much fear. You know, we make the people ill, we make them to be disposed, to be receptive for the virus. if we make a fear pandemic, and this is what I would have done totally different if I would have the chance to be in one of these decision-making circles, I would have encouraged the people to mobilize their salutogenic resources and put all the money in empowering our medical resources and let the life go normally on. Because most of the people will not get symptoms when they live health-oriented. And if we concentrate all the medical resources and develop them and invest money in it and include what one did in some hotspots, that even senior doctors did come back to work, if we would have done this for the really severe ill people and having had protected those groups like the elderly with good protection environment, but not keep their relatives off, you know. Many old people did die because of loneliness and fear and were receptive. Yeah, we know this because in some of the homes of the elderly, we had a high number of infections and in others not. So these different levels who can influence the health state, I think, need to be known, need to be shared. And then there is on top, of course, a spiritual level. If people are inwardly peaceful, if they are trustful, if they live with prayers, with meditations, with a true connection with the spiritual world, they have, again, other forces of resistance than those people who are only trained in materialistic thinking and totally superficial lifestyle. And this is also a question of education. Why do we educate the children so unspiritually, only related for the outer life and disposed and made ready for the outer life? Everyone knows that the inner values are what counts. Why do we teach the children primarily with the outer values and not both in a good balance? Why are the arts so kicked out of the regular school systems? The arts are nourishing soul and spirit, and also the body, which must be active if we do arts. It's a full body activity and stimulating brain. So there are many, many, many thoughts I immediately have when you raise such questions. And I can only hope that we will not go on with this way of a health rulership in such a way that all the population in the future from now on has to be tested in each influenza epidemic and has forced to be vaccinated and controlled and supervised, you know. This is crazy. There is no need for that. And if this comes up, and I am not a suspicious theory follower, then I would say it is a misuse of a very one-sided medical model to suppress and to make people fearful and depending on the government.
And though this is what is happening actually in many countries, like also here, the crisis, the pandemic has given kind of a reason for the government to take over totalitarian control, and we are assisting to it.
Mm.
And it is a huge question because For instance, from personal point of view, I can say that I am so much struggling to find a way how to communicate towards the decision makers with whom I don't agree in a positive way, trying to focus on a constructive proposal and not to go only into the signing the petition against, getting against. We are fueling actually all the negative things that are happening by giving our attention to this. Mm-hmm. And we are so weak in getting united for something, for a constructive approach, because we should get united, for instance, in ensuring the possibility of choice in education or in pedagogy, or what Iliand is about, what Iliand is fighting for. Trying to address people who can have different opinions and conventions from other points of view. It doesn't matter if you agree on something, then you should be able to get united and work towards that something. And I was so much hopeful at the beginning of this crisis that the time has come and free forwarding can come into life, because this economic situation will make it necessary. People are losing their jobs. Artists cannot earn money with their art, because we have this stupid system of thinking that we can pay a man's work and worth, and a vision that should be overcome. This is what free-falling is about. And it seems that it always seems so naive now, even in only, after a couple of weeks' time, although there are so many encouraging examples of human solidarity, and this is so heartwarming. So how can we find, for instance, the way to address our decision makers who are now not listening at all? How can we unite at international level, for instance, in initiatives that that are constructive and that are for something instead of against something?
I think we have a lot of tools, and we are using this tool in Iliand, of course. And this tool is in Europe, for example, that we can gather in so-called ECIs for good goals. And for example, in my contribution to this Corona booklet, it was for me the most important thing not to blame anyone. I tried to just describe the development of this crisis first. Then I tried really good to understand why our authorities worked with lockdown and all this as they did, so that if they would read it, they would find themselves, that I understand. But then I also name that this way to react in the crisis, how our authorities did, comes out of this mechanistic infection model of reductionistic, materialistic, natural science-based medicine, excluding soul and spiritual potentials and the life forces, which can be stimulated in a different way. So then I show that it's totally understandable that everything is how it is, and that I appreciate the engagement. Yeah, one can really see there is real concern and the people want to do the best for the population. And I really believe that. But then on the other hand, to describe that we need a shift of paradigm, we need a new way of thinking. You know, if you are not against, then you must work with the concept of freedom. If you do not want to polarize people in good and evil, not to create enemies, then you need to understand both, to understand different aspects of the same side and to inform people instead of to manipulate people. So I try to share what I know, not to convince people. Even when I now talk with you, I will not convince anyone who is listening to me at all. But I will honestly share what I think, because this enlarges this feeling free of the people. I feel as more free as I get new perspectives and can then make my own decision out of how I finally make my decision and balance out what I want to, or what I must to decide. And therefore, you mentioned some activities. I work for Iliant. I'm right now the president. And what is that? It is the alliance of all those initiatives who apply anthroposophy in daily life, in world of education, in Demeter agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, in anthroposophic medicine, and in many other fields of life, ecological banking, nursing, social work, threefolding in the business life. Yeah, what is threefolding? Threefolding is nothing else than to bring human viewpoints in business life. Rudolf Steiner, the founder of anthroposophy and all this, what we try to apply, brought all his ideas in form of thoughts, of concepts. And when we think them and understand them, then we can feel free totally to act out of our own and bring it into life. And then we can see, does it work well or not? And we can correct. But what was his advice for the economic life? That producers, consumers, and those who are in the beginning of the chain creating values, for example, the farmers, the workers in bringing up the metals and so on, that all these people sit together and overlook the whole chain development, the product chain, so that they together think what must be the price at the end, that along the whole product development chain, each one has enough to live and feels good treated, feels treated in a human way. You know, this is a total normal idea. But instead of that, each one tries to suppress the other to get maximum money out of. And so we split humanity in rich and poor. And yeah, but what do I say with this? If you start to think along real life and have the well-being of the human being in focus, then you learn to think in a healthy way and then you will also act in a healthy way. And that our world is today burning is because we act out of an ill, one-sided thinking. This is not a truly human thinking, to divide the world in rich and poor. Yeah, it is not a healthy way of thinking. And therefore, I think the most important thing we need to do is to make a change of paradigm in the schools and to bring a more healthy and spiritual orientation in all our teaching, so that the students learn self-thinking. And this you cannot learn with a screen. This you need to learn by reflection, by closing your eyes. Then you start to think. And that is what I wish. And if we don't do that, humanity will go from one crisis into the other until humanity wakes up. The positive message of each horrible issue is that in pain, people are waking up. And when they are feeling fine, they start to become lazy. And my ethic is to be lazy. No, not. To be not lazy when I am fine, but to be most active when I am fine. And only when I'm not fine, then I relax and give me time for only feeling good. So I try to live along a line that I do not need pain to wake up and to become active and ready for a change, but that I can see the change need by looking at other people's pain and trying to help them. And I see so much pain in this world, and therefore I see so much possibilities for change. But it all depends if you reach people's insight, people's willingness to think, to understand, and then each one in his or her place can do a lot for a change. I dream from a spiritual internet that we are connected in good thoughts worldwide, and that billions of people do the good because they stop with all those activities who harm our planet. And each person can do that if he or she wants.
This really seems like a beautiful rounding up of our conversation. I was thinking we are both very connected to biography work.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me always think that the cause is in the future. And if we look at this, it is a paradigm shift. If we look at something that is happening, like serving or development, is different than if we look at it as a punishment or a consequence of our deeds from the past. So yes, indeed, this crisis could be and should be a possibility to recognize what we can do in a different way, what changes are needed at personal level and at social level. But you mentioned the concept of freedom. And my concern is that we are not only the decision makers and the totalitarian regimes and the dictators are afraid of the freedom. The problem is that we are afraid of our freedom. Sometimes it seems.
Yeah, that is true. Because freedom has the risk within. Freedom is really this attitude: I can do out of my own what I think is correct or is what I should or would like to do. And for me, it was very teaching and helpful to work a lot in Asia, in India, in China, Taiwan, New Zealand, but particularly China and Malaysia also, where are many Chinese people. Because there I met a high sense for the community and little desire for individualism. And I realized what they have too much in regard family orientation, we in the West and in Europe have too much as a orientation to focus on the individual. Yeah? And I think what we can learn from one another is to wake up that freedom has two sides, as the individual has two sides. You know, one side of the individual is loneliness. Each one will one day die alone. Everyone has his, her own destiny. Yeah? We are accompanied time-wise, but no one knows if one day I'm abandoned. So one part of our identity is I have to learn to cope with loneliness, to stand on my own feet. But the other side is to love the world, to love others, to feel connected. The I am competence has these two sides, self-identification and world and humanity identification. Yeah? Just these two sides. And the same with freedom. I can use freedom to cut myself off, to go my own path, to leave my brothers and sisters, to look for my own peers, and to do what I want. So that is the freedom of. And the other side of freedom is the freedom towards. And that is so precious. I can use my freedom to see others, to support others, to help others, to put myself in service of others, to identify with others, it's my free decision to serve with my energies. And this freedom is the core of human dignity. One of the most powerful books I ever read is by Skinner, already published in the 50s in America and was properly translated in almost all languages. And the title was Beyond Freedom and Dignity. Jenseits von Freiheit und Würde. A beautiful book. Totally materialistic oriented, behavioristic oriented, but so clear in describing. He says, humanity has only one problem, and that is this crazy idea of freedom and dignity. If we would stop thinking that and erase it from our platforms, we would all have a happy life. And then he describes a lifestyle like Animal Farm. Yeah? A big boss knows what is good for us, because if we have not the concept of freedom, no one would like to have anything else special. Then we are satisfied, we are fed, we have nice clothes, we have sex, we have nice nutrition, we are pretty, we get served our needs. And when we live without freedom, we have no problem. And this is described so extensively and good. And on the other hand, you see, we would lose our humanity if this would be the perspective of development. But we are fully in that, because many people think freedom is so dangerous, security is better. Yeah? Already today, if you ask the people now, 60 to 70% would say safety and security first, freedom second, and not the other way around. And therefore, Skinner is still very worth to read. And also people like Hans Jonas, great ethical philosophers of the 20th century, because humanity is a spiritual value. And for me, this word from the Gospel of St. John, in the world you have fear, but look at me, I have overcome the world. Yeah, of course, our physical body is vulnerable. We have fear in this world. This is normal. But within us is an undestroyable, untouchable spiritual nucleus, spiritual center, an inner sun, an higher self we can reach, we can develop, we can free in us, which accompanies us, which is within us, which is our identity throughout our biography. And when the body one day will be, destroyed and we die, then with this eternal being, which we can think, which we can feel, which we can develop, which is part of us, our invisible identity, with this eternal invisible identity, we can live on. And if we cannot connect this spiritual concept of our human dignity with our material, body-oriented concept of our human lifestyle and way to be, then we lose half of our humanity. And I hope that all this fear the Corona crisis brought brings in many biographies an wake-up process about for the inner spiritual dimensions of our development. And if you look at them on philosophical pathways, like anthroposophy is doing, or on religious pathways, like religious or esoteric streams or orientations are doing, this is total up to you in your freedom. But all these orientations are based on thinking. Without thinking, you cannot find any orientation, neither materialism nor religious nor spiritual orientation. Without thinking, you will not understand anything. And therefore, I can only come back and back and back again. We need to help the students that they learn self-thinking, to use their own mental power individually and not stimulated and making depending by authorities. A human being following authorities is like a child on mother's hand. But this is not the dignity of man. Authorities must give us good advice, but then let us free to listen to other authorities or to wait and see, but not to react immediately. And that is what Rudolf Steiner wanted in regard health. It's a very interesting concept. 100 years ago, he developed this already in a lecture, a public lecture on health system. It was, by the way, at the end of the Spanish influenza. And Ita Wegmann, the founder of anthroposophic medicine, she was suffering from this influenza. She had it and survived well, could cope. But Rudolf Steiner develops the concept of the democratization of the healthcare system. He says the patient must become the partner of the doctor, not the follower. They must have the same level. The doctor's task is to teach the patients all conditions of health and make him to be self-decisive about his own health and take the doctor's advice as professional advice when this is needed, but in such a way that the patient understands and can follow also with his own understanding, and not just like a sheep, the shepherd. And he warned already 100 years ago to come into authoritarian structures, that science and politicians will work together, particularly on the health system, and create a health dictator, an authoritarian healthcare system. And when I read this now, 100 years later, again in Corona times, I really thought it is the best I read. What is happening now? We experience a complete health dictator, and we all follow like sheep. And that is, of course, good. Yeah? I am not against. I cooperate completely. But I know this is not the end of the story. We need to learn out of this experience to do it next time different and not repeat this regime again. We need to learn out of it what was good and what was really silly and irrational. We know why we did it, but now we know it better and we will not repeat. That is what I hope.
Michaela, I have sent you a very long email with all kinds of questions that were just supposed to be there as preparation for a conversation. My questions, questions of colleagues, psychologists, Waldorf teacher, researcher of spiritual sciences. And we took them with us as a background in our conversation. I very much like where we arrived. I think that I hope that you will also be satisfied when you will listen to our recording. But I want to ask you before closing up, is there something that you would like to add? I have so many questions, so many, so I have to stop. But there are so interesting things in your book that we are now translating. We have your chapters translated, and now we kindly received the possibility to proceed with the whole book, so we will do so. There are amazingly interesting things about the viruses, about the medical background that we could not really get into now in this interview, so people will hopefully read, and hopefully even decision makers will read it. But until then, is there something that that you would like to add as a closing thought or message or whatever?
Well, one thing for sure, I wish all those who were listening our attempt to talk about difficult issues, which are touching all of us, that I really wish all our listeners good health and that they really feel encouraged to make the best out of this crisis, and that our human biography is about learning and not about having. It is about becoming and not about standing still. We are really on a journey in which we have the chance to develop. And there are always two possibilities to stimulate the human development. One comes through our own inner reflection, that all of a sudden we have a new idea and we change something in our life. But the other possibility to stimulate our development are the outer circumstances. And for me, this is such a big call for humanity, this complete change in the outer circumstances, that I can really hope from the bottom of my heart that many, 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 many people take this as a call for development and to take new steps in their own lives, which make them more happy and more inwardly warm and more motivated to participate in this whole humanity developmental process and progress. That is what I wish. Maybe I can say this at the end. And that we are really a community of developing human beings, and that it is so beautiful that we can help one another on this journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michaela. Take care. Keep on, and we will continue.
Thank you. All the best for you, Anna. Bye-bye. And thank you for the translation. It was for sure not always easy, this mixture of German and poor English.
Thank you.
Bye.
Miklos too. Thank you.